Hey everyone, this is John from eastcoastarmory.com and I'm here today with a model showcase video for this 1/35th scale German Panther F. The model that you see here is built for my own personal collection and is not for sale and or purchase. However, like many of the other smaller scale builds that are showcased on the ECA channel, in which many of those builds are built for commission, I often take on commission build projects from models ranging from 1/35th scale all the way up to 1/6 scale. As for availability and pricing information, all this information would be available by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. Now the model here did start off as a plastic model kit, however has been upgraded with a lot of photo etch as well as other aftermarket components. We'll be going over all these modifications and additions as well as even reviewing the base starter kit in this video. Let's take a quick walk around of the model. And this model here is the German Panther F medium tank. As we all know, the Germans went ahead and designed the Panther to be the next generation of medium tank design after the Germans' encounter of the T-34 on the Eastern Front. The Panther was adopted by the German Army and went into full production. The vehicles, of course, first saw combat in the Battle of Kursk. Now, it was at this point here where the Panther was really first fielded and did have several teething problems, like any other first-generation adopted vehicle would. Albeit not exactly at the optimum time, in the case for the Germans at Kursk. After the tank's performance, many changes were submitted and made to the Panther's design. Even though the Panther was in full production and was a very viable tank design, there was still the need for the German High Command in order to improve the tank even further from its original design and production status. Some of the proposals included increasing the tank's armor protection, simplifying the tank's suspension, giving it cross-platform shared components with other German vehicles, and also upgrading the vehicle's main armament. The proposed vehicle to receive these changes was to be called the Panther II. By the time the designers came up with the design changes for the Panther II project, this was around the same period where the King Tiger started to come off of the production line. And the designers incorporated many of the design cues that went into the King Tiger into the new Panther II project. One prototype hull was assembled and was pretty much completed. Before the entire tank can be completed as a whole and enter into testing and evaluation, the project was abandoned. It was determined that it would be better to allocate the remaining resources and factories available to focus on Panther G production instead of retooling up for a new vehicle. At this point here, the Panther G was in full production, and pretty much most of the major teething problems that plagued the earlier Panther variants were worked out by this point. Even though the Panther II was a dead end, one of that vehicle's design cues, which the German High Command was actually interested in, had to do with the turret redesign. The new turret redesign was known as the Schmalturm turret. The Schmalturm differed from the standard Panther turret in its overall configuration. The turret's angles were much different and also were, again, heavily influenced from the King Tiger, not only with the turret but also with the mantlet as well. Some of the advantages that the Schmalturm had over the standard Panther turret was ballistically it offered better protection, and also for production, the turret was easier and quicker to assemble and put together compared to the standard Panther G turret. The new turret still utilized the 7.5cm KWK-42 L70 main gun. The one difference between the gun from the earlier Panther generations and the Schmalturm's version had to do with the absence of the muzzle brake, which is found on the other Panther variants. With the new turret's redesign, some of the internal mounting equipment was modified, which negated the whole need for having that of an external muzzle. This, of course, also saved on production time and resources. One very interesting feature of the Schmalturm turret is that on the corners on the sides, there were two blisters that housed stereo optic rangefinders. This is very ahead of its time and is actually something at the same time the US was experimenting with on their next generation of tanks, and of course would come to be standard equipment on vehicles such as the Pattons as well as the M60. The idea was very simple. In order to upgrade the Panther, they were going to simply swap out the standard turret with that of the new Schmalturm. The vehicles with this new configuration would have been known as the Panther F. Automotive-wise and lower hull-wise, the Panther F was identical to that of the Panther G, so no modifications were needed to be made to the lower hull whatsoever. The only difference has to do with that of the turret. Several Schmalturm turrets entered into production, however the war ended before they were able to be completed and even fitted to a vehicle. No Panther Fs were known to have ever been assembled. The partially started turrets that were created were all captured by the Allies and sent back to their respective countries for evaluating and testing. Most of these turrets were just scrapped after their testing was completed, except for one example which was actually foolishly used as a range target on a British Army test range for several years. Once the historical significance of this turret was realized, the remnants of the turret that were left were actually salvaged and are now currently on display in the Bovington Tank Museum in the United Kingdom. Before we continue with the video, let's go ahead and take a step back to when the model was first started in order to get a good idea on what the base starter kit supplied you with. And here's the model just before the start of the project. For the base starter kit, I'll be utilizing this vintage 1990s Dragon Panther F 1/35 scale plastic kit. This particular kit here I acquired off of eBay a little less than a year ago and has been sitting in the shop for not a whole bunch of time, but there's still a little bit of dust on it. As for these kits themselves, these kits date back to the mid-1990s and were released at a time when DML was really just starting out as a model company. During this time, Dragon did not have a whole lot of money to invest in tooling of their own, so what they would do is they would acquire tooling from other manufacturers' kits on the market, and then they would add new add-ons to them to make them different from the other variations that were released by the other companies. In this particular case here, this Dragon kit here is actually based off of the Italeri Panther tooling. This is not something that is unheard of or uncommon for Dragon, specifically with kits dating back to this time. If we recall my other vintage Dragon model videos, namely that of their vintage Imperial Series M4A3E8, those kits underneath the box were Italeri tooling for that of the lower hull, but Dragon went ahead and added components such as the T-23 turret, as well as also the HVSS suspension. This Panther here is no different. When I crack open the box, you're going to be seeing Italeri tooling on the inside. Now, this borrowing of tooling is only present on Dragon kits of this early time period. Shortly, or I should say a few years later, into the end of the 1990s and early 2000s, Dragon would spend a lot of time in retooling and redeveloping the kits that utilize the Italeri tooling in order for them to be more Dragon-esque. However, there are still certain key features that are found even on some of their kits today that trace back to the lineage of the Italeri tooling. Now, as for this particular kit here, this is again a Panther F, and what was unique was at this time there were no other renditions of the Panther F on the market, specifically in 1/35 scale and also in plastic. There may have been some resting conversion sets out there for the Tamiya or the Italeri kits, as those were really the only two plastic 1/35 scale Panthers that were on the market at that point. So Dragon releasing this model in all plastic was definitely something that put them on the map, and this was true for a lot of their other releases as well during this time period. Starting with the model's graphic design takes us to, of course, that of the box art. The box art is that of a Panther F driving down a bombed-out European, probably German street, in, of course, late winter of 1944 or early winter 1945. We have here the Panther F, which is very decently rendered. On the side here, we have a knocked out Russian T-44 medium tank, which is also a very interesting choice for that of a background photo, as well as some other unidentified wreckage of some kind of Allied vehicle on this corner here. As for the box art, the illustration is very nicely rendered, which is typical again for Dragon box arts of the past and also even up through today. As for the illustrator, can't really read that name. However, his work has been showcased on several other Dragon box arts of the past. Going towards the side panel, we have here this typical Dragon graphic design of the Imperial series, specifically of the 1990s. We have here a grill, which was another kit offered in this line. There goes the importer information from Marco Polo. Again, 1994 copyright. A little sticker with little accessories that were included with these kits here. As we recall, on the last 1/3 scale Sherman that I did, it did have a resin hull, and you can see some of the other features that were available at this time. Here we have just a sample image of a built vehicle. Cracking open the box is where the real interesting stuff happens. And as soon as the box is open, we are greeted with that of a sales flyer. Overlooked and neglected, but fully appreciated by DML. Of course, this is referencing the fact that DML is focusing on doing vehicles off the beaten path, such as this Panther 2 over here, which, by the way, is basically the same kit contents as this Panther F here. However, this kit differs in a different running gear, as well as also a few other odds and ends, which make it stand out from the Panther F. This kit here is actually a very nice kit. My father built it back in the 1990s, and it's definitely one I wouldn't mind picking up again. Also, as a side note, this kit here was recently re-released by Dragon, so tracking one down is actually relatively easy. Of course, this is the Panther F, and over here is the M4A3E8, which, of course, I've done a video on, and it can be found on the ECA channel. As for the background, there's lightning and looks like some stock photography of a lightning bolt hitting the ground at some farm somewhere. What does this have to do with 1/35 scale tanks? Your guess is as good as mine. Moving on from the sales flyer takes us to that of the instructions. Typical for Dragon of this period. As we can see on this runner here, almost none of these parts are going to be used, as these are that of the rubber rim tires. And this runner specifically, I'm going to go into in a second. Okay, the first runner greeting us is that of the turret. The turret that we see here is, again, all plastic tooling, and is type of tooling which one would expect from Dragon kits of this period. It's molded in this gray plastic. The detailing is molded in, however, is definitely would be considered a lot more primitive compared to the type of tooling of today. However, for the purposes of this build here, the molded in tooling is definitely adequate for the type of build that I'm doing, and will be done basically as is. Moving from the turret, now takes us to the upper hull. Now, the upper hull tooling that we have here is uniquely made by Dragon. However, this component here is one of those pieces that were taken from the Italeri. Dragon went ahead and made some tweaks and alterations to the component, and then made it their own. Here you can see the type of molded in detailings, like the tool post, the grill work, and the engine hatch. Again, this would be considered very primitive for modern tooling, but again, for the mid-1990s, this was definitely a leg up from the competition. Getting towards the bottom of the box now takes us to the straight-up reproduced Italeri tooling. This here is that of the lower hull and the running gear. Now, if anyone has ever built an Italeri Panther before, you will definitely recognize this runner. See the road wheel detailing. And one of the key features that makes this the Italeri are some of these components that we have over here. This little piping component is for that of the Panther's engine compartment. Why this is relevant is that on the Italeri kits, the Panthers had a option to have the engine compartment either displayed in open or closed state. Because of that, you would have a little engine drop-in insert, and you would have this little piping detailing here, which would be that for the coolant tubes. On this kit here, this is completely irrelevant and useless, specifically since Dragon went ahead and molded the hatch shut. However, this here is again lifted directly from the Italeri. And to showcase how it's a complete straight-up copy of the Italeri, right here, I have none other than a 1/35 scale Italeri Jagdpanther. Well, I open up that box and dig out the hull runner. You will see the exact same runner. Cooling tubes and all. Note the Italeri identification tag. And note the Italeri identification tag as well as that conical center chunk here on the runner as well. Now again, this is only found on these first generation Dragon kits. Shortly after this generation came out, the next batch of kits, Dragon went ahead and did what they did with the upper hull, in which they took the Italeri lower, made some modifications and tweaks to it, and that would be the type of lower hull component found on the other kits that came later on, such as, again, the Flak Panther Colian. Digging on deeper into the box takes us to that of the suspension. We have here, this is all Dragon original tooling. Here we have the steel wheels, the little lugs for that of the spacers, as well as the sponsons and the side skirt mounts. Moving from the wheels now takes us to the tank's Caterpillar tracks. Now, being a tank kit from DML at this period of time, this tank features the infamous, cancerous, individual link and length track. As we all know from my videos, I have an utmost loathing for these tracks, and personally I think they're nothing but garbage. These tracks will definitely not be utilized on this build here. In place, I'm going to be using a set of aftermarket tracks, which I currently have en route. Of course, more information on this is to come once the model is built in the latter half of the video. Moving down to the bottom of the box now takes us to the last runner and accessory that we have here. These parts here were showcased on the side of the box as an extra add-on, and it's that of some 1/35 scale German tank figures. Now, I don't build any figures, so this entire runner is going to be placed in my spare parts bin and is not going to be used. One interesting fact, though, is that there is a little fret of photo etch, which is used for that of straps for that of the binoculars, as well as I believe also the MP40, which is definitely something that was truly groundbreaking at this point in time when these kits came out. Stuff like photo etch was really cutting edge, and Dragon including it with their regular kits was definitely something that gave them a leg up in the marketplace. Now, in addition to that photo etch, I neglected to point out that there's another set of PE that is supplied with this kit. Here we have some basic PE, which is that of just the grill covers. And this does save a little bit of money in that you don't have to acquire these components on the aftermarket scene. This PE should be more than enough and adequate for the type of build that I have in mind. Also included is that of a set of water slide decals. Now, these decals are very old. However, I've had some good results with these older Dragon decals on past builds, and the quality of these decals seem to be very well. However, more information on this, of course, is to come after the vehicle is built and painted. Now, at the very bottom of the box, I have here some scrap pieces of spare parts. These pieces here I added myself. In fact, these were just spare parts from the other Dragon Panther F that I completed a little while ago. That video, of course, is on the ECA channel, and there I go into more information about that model. However, that model is based off of the most current and up-to-date tooling that Dragon has for the Panther F series, and that model is light years ahead of this old first generation release. Some of the updated parts I'm going to be added is that of the gun barrel, as well as a few other smaller bits, odds and ends, that I'm going to be discussing more in depth as the video progresses. Starting with the upper and lower hull, because these components here are based off of Italy tooling, you will inherit on this kit many traits that are commonly found on the Italy Panther kits. Starting with, of course, that of the rear section here of the hull. The way the Italy, in this case Dragon, hulls are designed is that in order to complete the length of the lower hull, there is a section that needs to be glued on. Of course, when you glue this section on, you will have to contend with a small little seam. It is best to tackle this seam prior to the installation of the suspension, as well as also the road wheels. Another area to watch out for, besides the seam work in the back, has to do with the front transmission and final drives, and where they descend from the lower hull. On the Italy, in this case Dragon tooling, when everything is assembled, you will have these square notches found in these two sections over here. I'm going to drop in a photograph during the build so you get to see exactly what I'm referring to. This is again a common occurrence on the Italy kits. Now luckily on the Panther there is a nice weld bead that is present on these two sections over here, and once added, thoroughly delete and cover up any trace of the notch. As for the welds themselves, these were sculpted out of red putty. Now, one nice addition that Dragon made to the Italy tooling is that of the tank sponsons. The sponsons, once added, make the tank a more solid of a model, and also gives it the accuracy of having the under sponson detailing. Now, the sponsons, again, are kit supplied and fit on pretty well. I will say, though, that when it came time for fitting of the upper and lower hulls, there was some seam work that needs to have been contended with. This was, of course, deleted with that of bodywork. The rest of the uppers fit and finish was pretty decent. Again, you have to keep in mind these older models do require a little bit more hand fitting compared to their contemporary releases. So you might want to test fit the piece a couple times just before committing with that of glues. Moving our way to the model's running gear, like I said before, one of the changes that I made was the replacement of the kit's bump stops. The kit does supply you with, again, a very basic set of these details, but rather than using them, I swapped them out for the modern Dragon counterparts that I had on hand from my spare parts box. It's one of those details that are not really noticeable, but it's one of those things that I just had on hand, so why not use it? Now, when it comes time for that of the road wheels that you see here are all the stock components, and they assemble pretty well. I will say, though, that the suspension swing arm rods do need to be trimmed for some of the wheels. If you try to install the road wheels to the stock set, you're going to have alignment issues as the rods are actually longer than the sockets found on the road wheel hubs themselves. I just simply, with a snip, I removed about 1/8 of an inch off of the problematic ones, and once done, the wheels went on without any problems. The idler wheels too were mounted totally stock and really didn't need any other modifications made to them from the kit. Where the changes come has to do with that of the sprocket and of course the track. Now for the track, as we all know, my disdain for the Lincoln Lang tracks are legendary, so they were, of course, were not utilized for this build. In their place, I went ahead and got a set of workable track links from Bronco. And here are the tracks that I used for this model. For the tracks, like I said before, they are the workable track links from Bronco, and specifically these are the late pattern, which would be appropriate for a Panther F. Now, at first when I was starting the project and looking for aftermarket tracks, I was going to use either a set from Fruity Model or a set from Master Club. Both companies have very nice offerings, and both look like they would have worked just fine on this build. However, while on eBay looking to acquire some track links, I ran into these plastic tracks from Bronco. Now, I've seen and heard about these tracks for a little while now. They've been on the market for a few years. I found a YouTube video tutorial where the guy does a review and he starts assembling them on screen, and they look like they had potential. I was intrigued enough that I went ahead and actually purchased the links, and after a little while they came in from the vendor, which is listed in the video description below, and I started getting to work on the track links. Now, what's nice about these tracks is that they are a lot more affordable compared to the metal counterparts. Boat Master Club and the Fruity links retail about $30 to $45 US, while these tracks here are about $19 to $25. The tracks are molded in this brown plastic, which is quite common and is very reminiscent to the type of quality found on the AFV Club track links, such as from the HVSS Sherman, as well as also their Pershing series. The tracks come on these runners, and you simply clip them off and start connecting them together, after the links are all deburred, of course. The links do have some nice detailing to them. One noticeable detail is the fact that the horns are hollow, and they have their rigidity casting marks pre-molded in. They also have their little hinge pattern, which on a Panther has a squiggle shape to it, and is something that is very noticeable on Panther links specifically. The face detailing is also pretty good, and the sets are pretty straightforward with their shape and design. Now, what's also nice about these tracks is that they do assemble pretty quickly, in that there's no pinning to do on these links. These track links are snapped together with their construction, which in theory is actually extremely excellent. You can clean, deburred links and then just plug them together until you have the appropriate length and then connect them to the tank. And by and large, this is actually correct. Each link has a male and female type socket, and on the male end you have two small little half-round nubs and two corresponding dish type inlets on the reverse side of the link. The track is only connected by these 2 points, and they need to pivot and lock together. However, I will say that the track links do have some problems with them. First and foremost, the material that these tracks are molded in are very soft. This is also true with a lot of the critiques found on the AFV Club, Patton, and Sherman links. Because of their material, the little nub that we have on the hinge section over here can easily wear out by just trying to clip the track link into place. The track links need to twist into each other in order for the pieces to slide in and conjoin in a nice strong manner. If you simply try to just put them in this type of a format, you can wear out the nubs, and then the track links will no longer want to stay connected. This of course becomes a problem when you start getting significant lengths of track, and also when the track is ready to be attached to itself once everything is fully built and painted. Trying to pivot the links in place when the piece is all this length is definitely something that is not very well thought out. Also, even though you can attach the tracks in the correct way with the pivoting action, like I said before, sometimes they will still not have a nice strong hold and will pop off with just a little bit amount of tension. It's to the point where a lot of people are going to be very frustrated when putting these track links together. And patience is definitely a virtue that one needs to have when working with these sets. Now the tracks again are workable, and if you notice in the picture here, they have a nice little example of some links all rolled up and over a small little piece of runner, and they do contort. And this is true. Now if anyone is thinking on making the tank motorized, or you're trying to have nice playable workable tracks, these are definitely not going to be for you. These tracks are, even once assembled, are extremely frail and can pop off with just any sheer amount of force that are applied to it. Now one saving grace for these track links when assembling them, and if you do run into a link that wants to just part all the time, is you can drill out the small little hinge section here on both sides. And the way this is done is with a pin vise. When it comes to these tracks, a pin vise with its exact same Dremel bit, which if I could get in focus you could see the size. This type of a bit here and setup is going to be your best friend. On a handful of links, I went ahead and drilled out the problematic nub and replaced it with that of a little strip of floor wire. The wire acts as a pin and holds it in place in a very sturdy manner, and without it, assembling this tank here with these two tracks would have been almost impossible. Now, once fully assembled and mounted to the tank, they are basically good to go and do have a nice little flexibility to them, like I showed before. However, you really don't want to push it with your luck with this set. In fact, while I was doing the photography, I actually popped one of the links by just moving around my tabletop here. I had to go ahead and take the sprocket off and actually drill out one of the link pins in order to get it reassembled again. Now, having said all that, there is also a little bit of a learning curve, again, when it comes to snapping these links together, and with the first few sets, I actually did have a lot more problems compared to the links I was assembling later on. I think if I was doing it again, I would probably be able to get through the tank without really needing the pin vise all that much, but it is a nice little insurance to have on hand. By the way, the pin vise is definitely a nice bit of equipment for modeling in general, and as a quick plug, I have the link for this where I found it on AliExpress listed in the video description below. It's $2 free shipping, and definitely something I can't recommend enough. Now, with working with these plastic tracks, there are some pros and cons. Pro, again, is that they are much more affordable compared to the metal counterparts and do assemble in a faster and quicker way, theoretically. They are also significantly better than, of course, the Lincoln Link track, which is needless to say. The tracks time well on this old school Italeri/Dragon sprocket. Now, the timing is a little bit on the stiffer end, but it does lock into the teeth in a nice manner, and you don't have to have too much force put onto the sprocket in order to contort it to fit inside of the sprocket holes found on the track links. Another pro that they have is that being plastic, you don't have to worry about any sort of lead contamination, which is something to keep in mind when working with either the Master Club, the Fruley, or even, I think, Spade Ace tracks as well. Now, some of the downsides is that the tank is light, and for a model tank, this may or may not be something that you're looking for. Specifically, if you're looking for something like diorama use, the metal tracks tend to be more desirable as they do settle the model down on the terrain it's placed on. Another benefit that the metal track has is it does have slightly better sag, in my opinion, than the plastic ones. Now, the plastic tracks do have some sag to them as they are, fully functional, but the metal ones seem to have a little bit more ease with their flexing, simply due just to the weight that the tracks have. Gravity tends to work in your favor. The metal tracks do tend to need to be drilled out with a pin vise like I have here, and do require, of course, the pin to be slid in. Now, on the metal track, this does take a little bit longer to do than on the plastic one, as with the plastic one, I did have to drill out one or two links here or there, while on the metal one, this needs to be done on every single link on both sides. So it does take a little bit longer to put together compared, again, to the plastic ones that we have here. Now, the question some people are asking me are, would I recommend these track links and would I use them again? And this might come as a surprise, but I probably would. The tracks themselves, again, do have some nice advantages to them. Of course, number one being that of cost. With the cost of the metal track links, they are really good, but the plastic ones do have that advantage. And after my experiences with learning how to assemble the track links on this one here, I think I could go ahead and build another set without really running into too many issues like I did with this one. Also, I know what I'm getting into this time, as opposed to just going in blindly like I did for this build. Moving away from the track now takes us to the tank sprocket. Now, the sprockets are the stock units and really are mounted as is. However, I will say that one modification that I did do was that I didn't cement them to the model. The reason for this has to do with that of the workable track. Now, the best way to install the track on this model is that you wrap the sprocket around the track sections, and then this allows you to slide everything in place and then connect the track at its conjoining point. If the sprockets are glued to the model, this will make assembly of the track a lot more difficult. And if they are glued to the model, and if you accidentally snap a link like I did earlier, and if you're going to try to repair it, when the piece is not glued on, you could just simply remove the sprocket and re-go through the track connecting process. If, however, the sprocket is permanently attached to the model with that of cement or superglue, well, to put it mildly,
gonna have a bad time.
Now, to keep everything in place and to prevent the sprockets from ever sliding off, I did glue them onto the axle, but I used that of some Elmer's white glue. The white glue gives you enough strength to hold the units in place. However, it is a temporary bond that can easily just pop off if need be. Moving from the sprocket now takes us to that of the bow MG34T. Now, the stock kit does supply you with this detailing. However, the stock kit does leave a lot to be desired and is probably one of the biggest eyesores on the whole model. The kit was designed to have a pivoting machine gun function, which again is from the 1970s from the Italeri. The problem with the Italeri piece is that the machine gun intersection is completely hollow, and there's not even the ball section, which is, of course, is needed for that of this detailing. The machine gun was also an issue in that the Italeri kit gives you a standard infantry MG34 with the perforated barrel shroud. This machine gun was never utilized for a bow gun on any German tank. On the Panther, the King Tiger, and the Tiger 1, in their place they would have utilized that of the MG34T. It's the same exact gun, but the difference is that of the barrel shroud. Rather than having all those fine perforations, the barrel was a lot simpler and had a elongated slot on the side, which made for a stronger housing. Rather than trying to fix and repair that unit, I simply replaced it altogether. This entire setup that you see here was scrounged from my spare parts bin and is courtesy from the last Dragon Panther F build that I mentioned before. With the way that kit is designed, you will have an entire complete barrel cluster for the bow gun that is not going to be used. This system here was simply dropped onto the model and the original kit unit was jettisoned. The new version is superior to the original one in every way possible, from the cast texturing to the geometry of the lower third portion here, to even the MG34T, and the barrel is, again, pre-drilled out, and it's not something I have to worry about. This is one modification that I cannot recommend enough, and will really make the model shine, and really elevate it to the next level. Now, I'm pretty sure that there's an aftermarket source for one of these machine gun balls, be it either in resin or possibly even wide metal. But if you can find one, definitely drop it onto one of these older kits if you're working on one. Moving from the bow MG takes us to the toe claw mounts. The claws are a bit of detailing that are very iconic on the Panther series, and with the Panther F it's no different. The pieces that you see here on this model are stock with the kit and were used as is. Now, one bit of detailing that Dragon neglected to give you has to do with that of the mounts for that of the claw. On the Panther series, on the tool post mounts, there are these two tubes that emerge from these sections, and the claw would slide over them and then lock in place with two lock pins. Now, what's interesting is that on the Dragon kit, they went ahead and gave you the indentations found on the tool post for that of these exact same pieces, and on other kits they actually give you the little pieces to glue in place. However, on this kit over here, that doesn't seem to be the case. Dragon literally just neglected to give you this bit of detailing. It's not found in the instructions, it's not found in any of the part runners, and it's not even found on the sample model built on the box art. So you're going to be on your own with fabricating these pieces yourself. Now, the way the kit is designed, you just simply glue the claw in place and call it a day. However, anyone who's a Panther aficionado over there is going to notice that you're missing these little bit of details, and it is something that can hurt the look. Fortunately, replacing these details is a very simple feature. After the claws were glued in place and the adhesives were all dry, with a pin vise I went ahead and drilled out the two small sections where the two mounts would go. Once the sections were drilled out with two wire brads, I inserted them in place and painted them with the model's coloring. This little bit of detailing gives you the absent pieces and also helps the look of the model and keeps anyone's OCD at bay. Or it should anyhow. The rest of the model side hull detailing was left stock and was simply built out of box, with no mods really needing to be mentioned at all for these details that we have here on the sides. When it comes time for the spare track racks, the track links you see here are the workable track links that I mentioned before for that of the main track spans. These were used in place of the stock Dragon ones, in that the detailing found on the aftermarket ones were far superior. They give you the nice hollowed out guide horns, and they do have the other sort of detailing found again on the Panther links. They were mounted as is to the stock spare track racks with no mods necessary. It was a simple swap that again is one that does help the look compared to using the stock counterparts. From the spare track links now takes us to the tank's rear hull. The rear detailing you see here is totally stock with no mods really made. The only thing of course to point out is that of the German rear convoy light and the reflector. With a simple drop of green paint to the small little squares and a little brush of gloss red to that of the reflector, make the tank pop and give it a little bit more life, and is one of those little features that are commonly overlooked by most builders. Moving up takes us to the tank's exhaust manifolds. The exhaust manifolds on these kits are actually very nicely done and aged very well. They have their nice little blower detailing and assemble fairly easily. Now there are some seam work to contend with, but this is par for the course for plastic models, and with a little bit of fine sandpaper and some super glue, you can easily contend with the seam work, buffing it down to the way you see it here. Another bit of detailing that these units have are the support struts are actually made from photo etch. Now this is theoretically better than on the newer kits, in that on the newer kits these sections here would be made from injection molded plastic, and the photo etch units are more to scale and are more superior. However, I will say that the photo etch units are very thin and fragile, and when working on one of the exhaust manifolds, I accidentally snapped the PE in half and the piece was rendered useless. I had to fabricate a new unit out of a thin piece of aluminum from a soda can. Once mounted in place, it looks indistinguishable from the stock unit. Moving from the manifolds now takes us to the rear deck detailing. Now, all of the rear deck detailing is stock with the exception of the photo etch grille covers. Now, like I said before in the unboxing, the kit does come with a set of photo etch. However, they were not utilized for this build. The reason for that has to do with the cold weather heating fan system that we have here. Here I have the original photo etch from the kit, and you'll notice that the grill work for that of the fan covers are just two simple round discs. With this version here of the Panther, these sets here are not ideal. The reason for that again has to do with this cluster. With this cluster, you'll notice that you have this star reinforcement setup with that of this elaborate little cage, and then you have these funnels which on the real tank would lock into place and would actually block off the air from emitting from the tank, which helps warm up the engine compartment. This is a staple on late pattern Panther Gs, and of course the Panther F is based off of those later units. Now, in its place, rather than using the Dragon ones, which are overly simplistic, I went ahead and replaced them with a set from Aber. The Aber photo etch I've used on another Dragon build in the past, and are, just like on that build, highly recommended. Now, what's interesting with the Aber set is that the Aber set actually is marked and advertised for that of the Tamiya Panther G, but is a direct swap out for that of the Dragon as well. No modifications were needed to be made to either the photo etch or the grill work on the model itself. The way you see it is the Aber set dropped directly in. What's nice is that I could rotate the turret and not risk of snagging the grill works here on the rear sections, which is something that can happen on Panthers. Another little bit of why not useless detailing that was added has to do with the fan grills themselves. Another spare part from the last Panther F build is that of the fan internal detailing for that of the grill work. I had these on hand from the spare parts bin. I dug them out and mounted them in place. They may or may not pop up in camera, but I have an insert on what the pieces look like just prior to the installation. Moving from the fans now takes us to the tank's antenna base. The antenna base is a standard German AFV unit and is stock and molded in with the kit. The only thing that I did was with a pin vise, I drilled out the unit a little bit deeper, so that's better support for holding that of the wire. When it comes to painting, the antenna base on these German tanks were actually made from rubber, so a rubbery black coloring was utilized. The antenna itself is painted black, and you'll notice that there's a small little brass section which emerges from the rubber unit. A little swipe of gold paint in 1/35 scale is all that's needed to give the illusion that the antenna is plugged in. And on the front, the travel lock is the stock unit, and we also have here the two little rubber bump stops for that of the hatches. These are also molded in, and a nice little swipe of rubber paint gives the model a little bit more pop compared to leaving it painted with that of the regular base coat. Moving our way up into the turret that you see here is built mostly stock and assembled very well. Now, one of the mods that I did do was on the little optics that we have here on the turret sides, which are actually very reminiscent to the ones found later on the M48 and the M47 Patton. The units have these little molded in holes for that of the optic detailing. However, one quick mod I did was with a Dremel. I drilled out these sections here, which does improve the look of the piece overall. Moving our way to the rear of the turret, we can see here some more small little grab handles. These are supplied with a kit, but like what is typically found on these type of components, are molded in such a fine, thin plastic that they rarely survive the extraction process, and these are no exception. The ones you see on this model here are fabricated out of bits of wire, and once added in place, complete the look. Moving towards the roof takes us to the secondary antenna base. Now, the model does give you the secondary base, but unlike the one on the hull, it's not represented for that of the rubber insulated version. Now, you can add a second antenna if need be. However, once added, the profile of the model sticks up a lot higher, and the way I display these models in a small little plastic case, and if added, it's going to cause problems with hitting of the top portion. So on this model here, I represented it for having only one radio configured in the hull, and the other antenna base is just absent its full antenna. In its place, though, I did add a small little piece of wire, and I painted it brass to simulate the connection point where the antenna would plug into. Moving our way to the tank's commander's cupola, the unit is totally stock, but one feature that the kit does have is the ability to have the hatch be functional. The hatch opens and closes and is a nice feature to have, even though there's no interior detailing on the hatch or inside the turret of any sort. Moving from the commander's cupola now takes us to that of the coax machine gun. The coax gun detailing you see here is not supplied with the old Dragon kit and is again a leftover from the other Panther F. The kit does have the mounting hole present for the coax, but just no detail insert is supplied. The detail insert was mounted directly to this older kit without really any mods being needed to have been made. The newer kit detailing does have the muzzle end drilled out and is a nice feature, and once added again makes the model pop a little bit more. From the coax now takes us to that of the mantlet. The mantlet that you see on this model is the stock unit, but was modified in that its cast texturing was added. As for the barrel, like I said before, the kit does supply you with a basic gun barrel, and the barrel is a two-piece type assembly. The stock barrel is totally workable. However, rather than utilizing it, like I said in the unboxing portion, I swapped it out with, again, a spare from the newer Dragon Panther F. That version was made as a solid piece, I believe is slide molded, compared to the older two-piece type molding. In order to mount the new barrel to the older mantlet, it did require a little bit of hand fitting, in that the hole for that of the stock older barrel is slightly larger than that of the diameter of the newer one. So a small little rest and turning was made in order to adapt the older mantlet to fit the newer gun. From the gun now takes us to the paint and the markings. For the model's paintwork, I went with a standard German three-tone ambush camouflage pattern. Now, the ambush scheme is a little bit different than some other units that I've done in the past, in that there's only two colors that are utilized for that of the ambush dots. Now, for the markings are a mix from the old kit as well as some spare decals that I had in my stash. The stock decals that are supplied with the kit are some Ghosts and Crosses, some vehicle numbers, which are your standard German red numbers with a white stroke, as well as a plethora of both kill rings and also kill silhouettes. In my opinion, the kill rings and the silhouettes are a little bit over the top for my taste and look like something better suited for a delusional Varibu to put on his model. Not so much for mine. The ghosted ring, or crosses I should say, were utilized, and the quality of the decals are pretty good, which is something that's interesting to point out since the decals are over 20 years old. Now, the numbers that were supplied with the kit were not utilized. The reason for that was that on the box art, I really liked the way the dark black with the white stroke pattern appeared. And for this build, I wanted to emulate that, so I scrounged into my spare decal bin and found the decals that you see here. Now, even though these are the all-black decals, in my opinion, they really match the overall look of the tank and really make it pop compared to using the standard German red and white stroke numbers. Now, these numbers, the 114, I believe came from an old Italeri elephant build that I did back in 2003 or so, and the decals went on without any hitches, and considering also the age of those decals as well. Another decal that I didn't utilize was the other Ghosted Cross, which would go in this section here at the rear. For this, I found another decal in my bin from, I believe, the Trumpeter Jagdpanzer E100, another build I actually did a video on. The reason for using this marking was, simply put, I kind of misplaced the other Ghosted Cross during my decaling phase, and I needed something, so I just scrounged it. Honestly, I kind of like the way it looks in that we have some continuity on the front, and on the back it spices things up by having that of a standard German cross. Combined with that of the 114 black numbers, I'm really liking the way the tank, this paint, and the camo all kind of works together. And since this build was heavily helped and assisted by the other Panther F I did, I might as well take the opportunity to take the other Panther F temporarily out of the display in the collection and put it here back on the showcase. Here you can see the two Dragon kits side by side. The original 1990s release and the more current 2010 era revised Panther F. This tank, by the way, in case anyone was wondering, has a model showcase video on its review and build as well, and I strongly recommend checking out that video after this one concludes. Now, even though this kit here is all original tooling, a lot of its influences, as well as the way the kit overall gets assembled and put together, is basically evolved heavily from the original Panther release that came out all those years ago. And even though this old model here has some age and is a lot more simpler compared to its more modern counterpart, once fully built and painted, they do hold up with each other pretty well. Overall, I'm extremely happy on how the model turned out, and it's definitely one that is going to be a welcome addition in my collection. Then again, it's always enjoyable in grabbing one of these older kits and building it up to make something nice and representable out of it. When it comes to a skill level and recommendation, the model itself was actually pretty easy to put together in its original plastic kit form. Keep in mind the model itself does trace back again to the older Italeri kits, which are somewhat simplistic. The Dragon tooling is also on the easier side, and the pieces are very large and fit together pretty well. However, it is something to keep in mind that the fit of the components on the plastic parts are a lot more primitive compared to what's commonly expected on more contemporary kits of today. These parts do require a little bit more hand fitting in order to get everything to fit perfectly. However, if someone is nice and careful and is patient, takes their time, they can easily manage and get the model built up. The number one caveat, though, has to do with that of the track. With the stock Lincoln Link tracks, I cannot recommend it to a beginner. Honestly, I can't recommend it for a middle-of-the-road builder or anyone for that matter, as I honestly can't stand Lincoln Link track. It sucks all the time. So an aftermarket track source will have to be acquired. Now, if anyone acquires an aftermarket workable set of tracks, this of course now does make the model more suitable for that of a middle tier or an expert builder. If anyone has a set of rubber single piece vinyl tracks, either from Tamiya or a set of modern DS tracks, which do pop up on eBay from time to time, something like that would definitely be suitable for a beginner to use, as it definitely cuts down on the complexity and difficulty of the build. Now, with the Bronco tracks that I use, the tracks themselves I also cannot recommend for anyone who's below an advanced or a medium range builder. These tracks, even though they are quite affordable compared to the other aftermarket offerings, because of their material that they are made in and the very small scale and size of the little snap points, these tracks here are extremely fragile and can definitely frustrate someone very quickly. They are only suitable for anyone who has a lot of patience, and is definitely not something I recommend for the average builder. Now, when it comes to recommendations, this kit here I definitely recommend for anyone who's of course a fan of World War II German armor or World War II armor in general. Needless to say, Panther fanatics is definitely someone who would appreciate this build in their collection, as the Panther F really fills in the other alphabets in the Panther series. This vehicle here also scratches that itch for anyone who's a fan of the late pattern German armor, such as the King Tiger, even the Maus, E100, and the other vehicles from that era. Another person who would appreciate a build like this would be anyone who likes to build and collect older Dragon or just old model kits in general, just like, well, yours truly. These kits here were somewhat prolific, and they can still be found online for decent prices, as well as also you might snag one at a model show or two. They do build well, and without a whole lot of extra elbow grease, they polish very nicely in my opinion. And with that, that wraps up this model showcase video for this 1/35th scale German Panther F medium tank. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As well as also, don't forget to swing by the eastcoastarmory.com Facebook page, where there are more photographs of this particular build that have been posted, along with many of the other smaller and larger scale builds that are found on the ECA channel. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks for watching.